Most people who plant a privacy screen regret the species they chose within 5 years. Not because the plant didn't grow, because it grew too fast, spread into the neighbor's yard, cracked a drain pipe, outgrew the space, or turned into the kind of maintenance problem nobody warned them about when they were standing at the garden center trying to solve the problem of feeling exposed in their own yard. Bamboo is the most famous example. Running bamboo species planted for quick privacy turn into decade-long legal battles with neighbors when the rhizomes cross the property line. But bamboo is just one of many fast-growing plants that come with hidden costs. And the honest truth is that a living fence is a long-term commitment that deserves more thinking than most people give it. I want to walk you through 9 plants that can genuinely function as a living privacy fence, each chosen because it actually delivers on its promises and doesn't come with surprise problems 5 years in. Some are extraordinarily fast. Some are extraordinarily durable. Some do a job no other plant on this list can match. But before we get to specific species, there are 3 practical considerations you need to settle before you choose anything, because skipping these is where most privacy hedge projects go wrong. First, check your local regulations. This is more important than almost any other factor, and it's the one most gardeners skip entirely. In the UK, the Anti-Social Behaviour Act of 2003 gives local councils the authority to intervene when a high hedge, defined as an evergreen or semi-evergreen line of 2 or more trees or shrubs over 2 meters tall, creates problems for neighboring properties. Leyland cypress hedges have been at the center of more neighbor disputes under that law than any other plant, which is exactly why I'm not including Leyland cypress on this list, despite how commonly it gets recommended for privacy. In the United States, most municipalities have fence and hedge height ordinances, HOA rules in planned communities, and sometimes specific restrictions on certain species. 10 minutes of checking local rules before you plant saves years of potential problems afterward. Second, think about roots. This applies to every plant with real size potential, and it applies especially to the fast-growing deciduous species that come up first on this list. Poplar and willow root systems can damage foundations, crack underground drainage pipes, and interfere with septic systems if planted too close to a house. The general rule is to keep large, fast-growing trees at least 30 feet from any building, drain line, or septic field. If your yard doesn't have that kind of buffer, the plants in the second half of this list are your better options. Third, decide what you actually want from the hedge. Pure visual privacy is one goal. Wind blocking is another. Year-round evergreen coverage versus seasonal deciduous screening is a major choice. Security, meaning a physical barrier that deters entry, is a fourth. Some plants do one of these brilliantly and others poorly. Matching the plant to the goal is how you end up with a hedge that works rather than one you tolerate. With those 3 considerations handled, let's start with the speed champions, because these are the plants to reach for when you need privacy fast and you have the space to handle them. Hybrid poplar is the first, and if speed is your priority above everything else, this tree genuinely delivers. Under good conditions, a hybrid poplar can add 6 to 8 feet of height in a single year. That's an entire ceiling height of growth in 12 months, which is a pace almost no other tree can match. It's hardy across U.S. DA zones 3 through 9, which covers nearly the entire continental United States and most temperate European gardening regions. It handles a wide range of soils, from clay to loam to slightly wet areas, and it's remarkably tolerant of conditions that would stress slower-growing trees. Plant hybrid poplars about 8 feet apart, and within 2 to 3 growing seasons, you'll have a solid wall of green. Not a suggestion of privacy, but an actual barrier. The downsides are real, though, and I want to be honest about them. Hybrid poplars aren't long-lived trees. You're looking at 30 to 50 years of useful life, sometimes less in challenging conditions, after which the tree weakens and starts dropping limbs. The roots are aggressive and shallow, which is why the 30-foot buffer from buildings matters. And the wood itself is soft, which means storm damage is more likely than with slower, denser species. Hybrid poplar is a sprint, not a marathon. If you need privacy now and you're willing to replace the trees eventually, it works beautifully. If you want a generational hedge, look further down the list. Hybrid willow is the second, and it's closely related in function to hybrid poplar. But it solves one specific problem almost no other plant on this list handles: wet soil. Most trees struggle in consistently damp ground, but hybrid willow thrives there. If you have a low spot in your yard that stays soggy after rain, a ditch line, a drainage swale, or an area near a pond that doesn't drain well, hybrid willow turns that difficult spot into a functional privacy barrier. Growth rates of 6 to 10 feet per year under ideal wet conditions put it in the same speed category as hybrid poplar. Hardy through zones 4 through 9. Plant 6 to 8 feet apart for a dense screen, and you'll see the branches meeting by the end of the second season. The same root concerns apply as with poplar, so keep it well away from buildings and underground pipes. But for the wet spot privacy problem, nothing else comes close to this plant's performance. The third is the one that comes with the strongest warnings on this entire list, and I want to be completely honest about it before I describe its benefits. The empress tree, Paulownia tomentosa, grows faster than anything else that could reasonably be called a hedge plant. Under ideal conditions, especially when managed as a coppiced screen, it can add 10 to 15 feet in a single season. Its spring flowers are genuinely beautiful, large purple trumpet-shaped blooms with a strong fragrance. It tolerates poor, rocky, nutrient-depleted soil that would kill almost any other tree. But the empress tree is classified as an invasive species in large parts of the eastern and southeastern United States. Appalachia, the Mid-Atlantic, and parts of the South have seen it escape cultivation and establish itself in forests, where it outcompetes native trees. Several states have it on official watch lists, and a few have begun restricting its sale. Before you plant this tree anywhere in the eastern half of the United States, check your state's invasive species database. If it's on the list, skip it entirely and move to the next option. If you're in the western U.S., the Pacific Northwest, or parts of Europe where it hasn't naturalized, and you're willing to manage it aggressively by coppicing, which means cutting it back hard each winter to force dense bushy regrowth, it becomes one of the most effective fast privacy screens you can grow. The key word is willing. Empress tree is a high-reward plant with real responsibility attached to it, and it only belongs in gardens where the gardener takes that responsibility seriously. 3 plants in, and all 3 share the same profile: extreme speed, serious root systems, and specific caveats you can't ignore. The next group shifts the conversation entirely. Speed matters when you need privacy quickly, but speed alone isn't enough if the plant doesn't last, requires replacement in 20 years, or drops its leaves and leaves you exposed for half of every year. The next group solves those problems. These are the plants you choose when you're thinking about the long term, not just this summer. Thuja Green Giant is the fourth, and if I had to recommend a single privacy plant to most gardeners across most of the United States and Northern Europe, this would be it. Not because it's the flashiest or the fastest, because it's the most reliable. Thuja Green Giant is a hybrid arborvitae that grows 3 to 5 feet per year under good conditions, eventually reaching 30 to 40 feet if left unpruned, though most people keep it trimmed at whatever height suits their yard. It's hardy through USDA zones 5 through 9, which covers a massive swath of both continents. It stays evergreen through winter without the bronze discoloration that affects many arborvitae varieties in cold climates. It's genuinely resistant to deer browsing, unlike many other evergreens that deer chew to the bone in late winter. It handles clay soil that many conifers reject. It's resistant to most common diseases and pests, and it naturally forms a dense pyramidal shape from the ground all the way to the tip, without requiring extensive shaping from you. Plant Thuja Green Giant 5 to 6 feet apart for a tight privacy hedge that closes in by year 4 or 5. Plant them 8 feet apart if you want individual specimens with some breathing room. This is a plant you put in the ground now expecting your grandchildren to still enjoy it, because a healthy Thuja Green Giant hedge can remain attractive and functional for 50 years or more. The one caveat worth mentioning is that in very hot, humid southern climates like coastal Florida or the Gulf Coast, it can struggle. If you're in those regions, focus on one of the other evergreen-compatible options and skip this one. Now, I want to address something directly, because Leyland cypress comes up in almost every privacy hedge conversation, and you'll see it recommended everywhere. I deliberately left it off this list, and the reason is specific. Leyland cypress grows fast, yes, and it's been planted widely across the United Kingdom and United States for exactly that reason. But it has two problems that make it a poor long-term choice for most gardeners. In the UK specifically, Leyland cypress is the plant most often cited in neighbor disputes under the Anti-Social Behavior Act, because it grows taller than most people realize and shades out neighboring properties. Councils have the authority to order homeowners to cut them back, and the legal and financial costs of that process are genuinely significant. In the American Southeast, Leyland cypress is increasingly affected by Seiridium canker, a fungal disease that kills mature trees in established hedges, leaving gaping holes in what was supposed to be a permanent screen. Thuja Green Giant solves both problems. It grows more gradually, stays more manageable, and has far better disease resistance. If you've been told to plant Leyland cypress, I'd seriously consider Thuja Green Giant instead. Black locust is the fifth, and this is a plant with a fascinating dual identity that deserves honest discussion. Robinia pseudoacacia grows 3 to 4 feet per year, works in USDA zones 3 through 8, and adapts to almost any soil, including sandy, rocky, or nutrient-depleted ground that would defeat most trees. It fixes nitrogen from the air into the soil, which means it actually improves the ground it grows in over time. The wood it produces is one of the hardest and most rot-resistant timbers in North America, with heartwood posts lasting 80 to 100 years in direct ground contact without any treatment at all. Before wire fencing became common, black locust was the fence post of choice across the eastern United States. People planted rows of it, harvested the posts, and the stumps resprouted to produce more posts, a self-renewing source of fencing material that grows itself. The thorns on wild-type black locust add a layer of physical security that genuinely deters intruders. The late spring flowers, long white fragrant clusters, produce nectar that beekeepers consider among the finest in North America. Thornless varieties are available for gardeners who want the growth and soil benefits without the security aspect. Here's where honesty matters. Black locust is classified as invasive in some U.S. states, including Wisconsin and Massachusetts, and across parts of Europe where it has naturalized outside its native range. It spreads aggressively through root suckers, which means new shoots can come up several feet from the parent tree, and managing that suckering requires regular attention. Before you plant it, check your state or country's invasive species listing. If you're in its native range across the eastern and central U.S., or in parts of Europe where it's established without being problematic, it's an extraordinary plant. If you're somewhere it's listed as invasive, respect that listing and choose a different option. Mulberry is the sixth, and this is where the privacy hedge conversation takes an unexpected turn. What if your living fence could also feed you? Mulberry trees grow 3 to 5 feet per year, work in USDA zones 4 through 8, and produce summer fruit that's genuinely delicious. Deep burgundy berries, sweet and rich, ripe by early to mid-summer depending on your climate. Red mulberry, Morus rubra, is native to eastern North America and is the cleaner ecological choice. White mulberry, Morus alba, was introduced from Asia and tends to naturalize aggressively. So I'd recommend red mulberry or named hybrid varieties over white mulberry for most gardens. Planted in a row and allowed to grow freely, or trained as a hedge with regular pruning, mulberry creates a dense leafy screen through the summer months. The canopy fills in thick and fast. Birds love the fruit, which means a mulberry row also becomes a songbird habitat, that brings real wildlife activity to your yard through the growing season. For gardeners who want something productive as well as screening, mulberry delivers both in a single planting. The honest limitation is that mulberry is deciduous. You lose the leaves in fall and winter, which means you lose the privacy during those months. If year-round screening is the priority, mulberry pairs beautifully with an evergreen backdrop like Thuja Green Giant planted behind or alongside it. In summer, mulberry does the heavy lifting. In winter, the evergreen handles the privacy while mulberry rests. That combination gives you the best of both, and the dropped fruit isn't a significant issue if you plant it away from walkways and seating areas where staining would matter. A practical note on all three of these plants: Thuja Green Giant is the one with the fewest practical concerns and the longest useful life. And if you're choosing only one plant for a permanent hedge, it's the safe answer for most gardens. Black locust is the plant with the richest set of secondary benefits: soil improvement, fence posts, bee forage, but it requires more active management to stay within its bounds. Mulberry sits somewhere between, offering fruit and wildlife alongside the privacy function, but only working as summer screening on its own. Each has its place depending on what you're actually trying to accomplish. That's 6 plants so far. 2 from the speed group, 1 clear long-term evergreen, 1 dual-purpose timber producer, 1 that doubles as a fruit source, and 1 invasive specialist I've been deliberately honest about. The last 3 plants on this list serve a different role entirely. They're about security, tradition, and beauty, the qualities that make a living fence feel like a chosen feature rather than just a barrier. The last 3 plants on this list are the ones that make a living fence feel like something deliberate. They're slower than the speed champions. They aren't the first choice if you need privacy in 18 months. But each one does something no other plant here can match. And for the right situation, they're genuinely irreplaceable. Hawthorn is the 7th, and this plant has been serving as a living fence across Europe for literally centuries. If you've ever driven through the English countryside and seen those ancient hedgerows dividing fields, most of them are hawthorn, and some of those hedges have been growing continuously for 300 or 400 years. That's the kind of permanence this plant offers. Common hawthorn and Washington hawthorn grow at a moderate pace of 1 to 2 feet per year, which is noticeably slower than most plants on this list. Hardy through USDA zones 4 through 7, with common hawthorn extending across much of the UK and Northern Europe as well. The reason to accept the slower growth is what you get in return. Hawthorn produces thorns that are long, rigid, and genuinely unpleasant to push through. This is not a hedge that a person or a large animal casually crosses. Before barbed wire existed, hawthorn was the standard security fence across Europe, and the phrase about something being tight as a hawthorn hedge was a real expression describing impregnability. Spring brings clusters of small white flowers that pollinators work heavily. Fall produces red or orange berries called haws, which songbirds feed on through winter, giving you real wildlife value alongside the security function. The foliage is dense and fine-textured, which means hawthorn hedges look clean and well-kept, even when they're doing the serious work of keeping your property boundary defined. For UK gardeners, hawthorn has an additional advantage worth mentioning. It's a native species across the British Isles and most of Europe, which means it supports native insect and bird populations in a way that non-native privacy plants don't. Planting hawthorn in a UK garden isn't just a practical privacy decision. It's a small contribution to the local ecosystem that the other plants on this list can't match. The one drawback is that hawthorn is deciduous, so winter privacy is reduced when the leaves drop, though the dense branching structure still provides meaningful screening even without foliage. Osage orange is the 8th, and this is the American equivalent of hawthorn, with its own remarkable history. Before steel fencing existed across the Great Plains, settlers planted Osage orange and described it as horse-high, bull-strong, and hog-tight. That phrase tells you everything about what this plant does when it's established as a living fence. Nothing gets through it. Maclura pomifera grows 2 to 3 feet per year, works across USDA zones 4 through 9, and is one of the toughest trees native to North America. Drought, heat, wind, heavy clay, rocky subsoil. It grows through all of it. The thorns on wild-type trees are serious, long, rigid, and positioned to make the plant essentially impenetrable when it's planted tight and trained from an early age. The wood is extraordinarily hard and rot-resistant, even tougher than black locust by some measurements, and was historically the preferred material for bows made by indigenous peoples of the Central Plains. The fruit is the thing most people notice first about Osage orange, those large, wrinkled, lime-green spheres that litter the ground in fall. They aren't edible for humans, and they were historically used as folk insect repellents, placed in basements and outbuildings to deter spiders and cockroaches. Whether the repellent effect is meaningful or mostly folklore is still debated, but the trees themselves are absolutely real, and the fence they create is unmatched for rural or agricultural property boundaries. Osage orange is slower to establish than most plants on this list, and it requires patience during those first few years. But for rural properties, working farms, livestock boundaries, or anywhere you want maximum deterrence without building a steel fence, it's in a class of its own. Thornless varieties exist for landscape use where the security function isn't the priority, but the thorned form is what gives it its reputation. And for serious property defense, the thorns are the point. Rose of Sharon is the 9th and final plant, and I'm ending on this one deliberately, because a privacy hedge doesn't have to be purely functional. Hibiscus syriacus grows 1 to 2 feet per year, thrives in USDA zones 5 through 9, and produces flowers from midsummer all the way into fall, exactly when most flowering shrubs have already finished for the year. Large showy blooms in white, pink, lavender, purple, and bicolors, continuing for 6 to 8 weeks when the rest of the garden is starting to look tired. Planted in a row and allowed to grow to its natural 8 to 12 feet, or sheared lightly to maintain a more formal shape, Rose of Sharon creates a privacy screen that's genuinely beautiful to look at from both sides of the property line. Your neighbors aren't going to resent it. They're going to ask you what it is. It's deer-resistant in most areas, tolerant of drought once established, and it blooms reliably even in imperfect conditions where more demanding flowering shrubs would underperform. For warmer parts of the US and most of southern and central Europe, it's one of the most visually rewarding privacy plants available. One management note worth being honest about: Rose of Sharon self-seeds readily, and seedlings will come up in your mulch and garden beds within a few feet of the parent plants. Deadheading the spent flowers before they set seed solves this problem entirely, but it's an annual task. If you want to avoid the seeding without the deadheading, look for sterile named varieties like Minerva, Aphrodite, or Diana, which produce little to no viable seed while still flowering spectacularly. That's 9 plants. Any one of them can serve as a functional living fence if matched to the right goal and the right conditions. But choosing among them depends on answering a few honest questions about your situation, and I want to walk you through those questions quickly before I wrap up. First, what's your time frame? If you need privacy in 2 to 3 years, and you have at least 30 feet of clearance between your planting line and any buildings or underground services, hybrid poplar or hybrid willow gets you there faster than anything else. If you're willing to wait 5 or 6 years for a permanent evergreen solution that lasts 50 years, Thuja Green Giant is the most reliable choice available. If you have patience for a decade-long investment that becomes a generational hedge, hawthorn or Osage orange rewards that patience in ways faster plants can't. Second, what's the purpose? Pure visual privacy is well served by any of the fast-growing options, plus Thuja Green Giant. Wind blocking works best with dense evergreens, again pointing to Thuja Green Giant. Security deterrence is where hawthorn and Osage orange earn their place, with black locust as a secondary option. Wildlife support favors hawthorn, mulberry, and black locust. Edible production is mulberry's specialty. Flowering beauty is Rose of Sharon. Third, what are the constraints? Proximity to buildings and drain lines eliminates the large-rooted fast growers and pushes you toward Thuja Green Giant, hawthorn, or Rose of Sharon. Neighbor relations and local privacy laws, especially in the UK under the Anti-Social Behaviour Act, mean you want a plant that stays manageable in height, which again favors Thuja Green Giant over Leyland cypress and favors slower, more controllable species over aggressive fast growers. Invasive species concerns in your specific region mean checking local lists before planting anything on this list that carries that risk, particularly empress tree, white mulberry, and in some states, black locust. Most gardeners choose a single plant for a privacy hedge. That's understandable, but it isn't always the best approach. A combination often serves better. Thuja Green Giant as the permanent evergreen backbone, with hybrid poplar or hybrid willow planted in front for immediate screening while the evergreens establish. Remove the poplars after 5 or 6 years when the thujas have filled in, or mulberry as a summer screen with an evergreen behind it for winter coverage. Layered plantings solve problems that single-species hedges can't, and they look more interesting too. Here's the honest truth about living fences. They aren't faster than vinyl or wood fencing in the short term. A vinyl fence goes up in a weekend. A hedge takes years, but over the long term, a living fence offers something no manufactured fence can match. It grows more valuable every year instead of deteriorating. It supports wildlife. It cleans the air and reduces noise. It becomes part of the landscape rather than an imposition on it. And in many cases, the plants themselves end up being among the most beloved features of the property. Long after the original owners who planted them have moved on, start with 1 or 2 plants suited to your specific situation. Plant them this season while the soil is workable, and give them the space and the early care they need to establish. 5 years from now, you'll have a living fence that keeps rewarding you long after you've forgotten the weekend you put it in. If this helped clarify the right living fence for your yard, type "grow" in the comments and hit the like button. It helps this channel reach more gardeners who are ready to choose the right plant the first time instead of the second or third. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.